I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The quiet hum of my new apartment in Colorado Springs filled the air, a peaceful sound I hadn't known in years. Just days ago, my daughter-in-law had slammed a door and called me just a guest. But I knew the truth. I was the silent force, the unseen hand that had kept their lives afloat. And now I had taken my hand away. My name is Margaret. This is my true story. My dear husband died of cancer 2 years ago. After he passed, I packed my few things and moved to Colorado. My son and his wife had just had their second child, a sweet baby girl. I thought living with family would bring me comfort. I thought helping with the grandkids, cooking meals, and sharing the bills would be good for all of us. I never thought I would become a guest in my own home. I always paid my share. I used my nurse's pension to buy food, pay for electricity, and cover medical bills. I even paid for the children's preschool when it became too expensive for them. And I paid for the extra electricity and gas needed during the harsh Colorado winters. I never asked for thanks. I thought that's how family worked. You give until it hurts, and you keep giving. At first, things were as I hoped. I was the helpful grandmother, full of jokes and warm hugs. The children laughed when they saw me. My daughter-in-law was polite, and my son called me Mom, just like always. But slowly, the warmth began to fade, like the tide going out to sea. Polite comments turned into sharp words. Mom, you left the garage door open again, my daughter-in-law said one day. I quietly said sorry and moved the car inside without another word. A week later, I found my family photos, which had been in a nice frame, moved to a small shelf in a corner. The shelf was labeled Mom's Keepsakes. The way they treated me changed even more. They started doing things without me. They made meal plans in a group chat that I was not a part of. They hired a cleaner even when I offered to clean. They even signed up the kids for camps without telling me. My help, which was once wanted, now seemed to bother them. I thought you were staying for a short time, my daughter-in-law said last month, as I served cinnamon rolls. I tried to speak softly. We need the guest room for storage or my craft corner. She gave me a fake smile. You should get your own place. I didn't answer. I just pushed my chair back and took my plate to the sink as quietly as I could. Then came this morning. I was making oatmeal and fruit for the children, just like I did every day. I heard their voices from the hallway. I didn't mean to listen, but it was hard not to hear her when she shouted so loudly. You're lucky we let you live here, she hissed, slamming the guest room door. You don't get a say under our roof. That sentence echoed in my mind. You don't get a say. You're lucky. My heart felt a sharp pain. I carried the bowls of oatmeal into the dining room, placing them carefully on the table. My grandson and granddaughter looked up at me. They still treated me like their grandma. They smiled. They thanked me. They believed I belonged. But where did I truly belong? Later, I spoke to my son. He was the one whose first word I heard, whose first steps I cheered. His face had the same kind eyes, but today there was something different, a hesitation, a feeling of guilt that disappeared when he looked at his wife. I am sorry, he said, looking away. I didn't mean. Let's just let her stew, she cut in. She was sitting on the couch, her phone quiet, her back straight. She will get it eventually. Just like that, they pushed me aside. I was no longer Mom, not really. I had become someone they allowed to stay, someone whose money they spent, but whose presence they hated. Half an hour later, I sat in my old armchair, my hands in my lap like a soldier ready for orders. I thought of my husband. I thought of the home we'd built together. I thought of the paint I used, which was named after him, and the floors we worked on late at night. Now, someone else ruled the house we bought, someone who treated me like a problem. I felt tears wanting to come, but I blinked them away. I became strong. It was not about anger. It was about truth. It was about remembering that while names could be removed, contributions could not be erased. I stood up slowly. The chair made a protest noise. I patted it once, as if to say thank you. Thank you for holding me up. When I finally stood, I knew I needed a plan. Her harsh words were still fresh in my mind. I promised myself I would remind them who truly kept their lives going. The very ground they stood on was shaking. I woke before dawn, as I always did. The house felt empty in the dark, and I felt needed, even when I wasn't. I slipped into the kitchen in my soft slippers, putting on an apron that still fit me from 5 years ago. I lit the stove and started cutting vegetables. Carrots for stew, spinach for quiche, apples for oatmeal. I put the coffee pot on to brew and placed bowls and spoons on the counter. I did this every morning without complaining because feeding my family felt like my purpose. I brought the food downstairs, stirred the oatmeal with a wooden spoon, and filled the kettle with hot water for tea. I rushed to shower and get dressed before the children woke up. Then I helped them through breakfast, reminding my granddaughter to wash her hands and helping my grandson find matching socks. Their laughter filled the kitchen, and I smiled because at least I belonged to them. We sat together at the long oak table, the same one I helped them pick out at the furniture store 2 years ago. I served oatmeal in simple white bowls, fresh fruit on the side, and a pitcher of orange juice. But when I sat down, I only took a seat at the far end. My daughter-in-law slid her plate across, then crossed her arms and sat with my son. My words were met with polite quiet. My questions were met with short answers. My presence felt like a blurry background, not a person to be cherished. During the meal, I felt eyes look at me from time to time. My son looked with pity, my daughter-in-law with judgment. I swallowed a bite of oatmeal, tasting cinnamon and fruit, wondering when I had become like wallpaper. It hurt more than I expected. As the children rushed off to school, I washed dishes and wiped counters. The house felt bigger now, too big in some rooms and too small in others. Empty spaces where my influence once shined. I folded laundry in silence, thinking about the day I first offered to help with bills. I remembered the look in my son's eyes when I said, "Let me pay for electricity, maybe preschool, to take some pressure off you two." He nodded. She looked unsure, as if she wondered why I insisted. I told them it was a gift from a mother who had lost her own mom too soon, who knew what it felt like to struggle. I created a special bank account in my name, never speaking about it out loud. My pension checks went into this account. From there, every month, money was taken out to pay for electricity, gas, groceries, and the children's preschool fees. I believed I was building a quiet safety net for them. I believed giving was enough to show love. But I didn't realize that money can become a weapon instead of a gift. I kept the bank account statements in my desk drawer. I looked at them sometimes, not because I wanted anything back, but to remind myself of the steady flow of care I was giving. I was the one holding them together behind the scenes, keeping the home running. And still, I didn't ask for thanks. One afternoon, I heard her talking to a friend on the phone. "She's just here because she has nowhere else to go," she said. I pretended not to hear, but something inside me tightened. She talked like I was a charity case, not a mother giving all she had for her family. I finished folding towels with shaking hands. That night, I was brave enough to bring up school lunches and school fees. Neither child qualified for the low-income discount anymore, and I thought she might like the help. I said, "Would you like me to cover the field trip fees too? I remember last year." She cut me off without looking up from her phone. "You don't have a vote." The words fell heavily, perhaps the heaviest words I had heard in a long time. Those words sounded like a decision. I did not belong here. I wanted to say so many things like, I paid for this roof, so you don't get to decide who eats at this table. But I only nodded. I reached for my teacup and took a slow sip, burning my tongue, trying not to let the tears come. When I went upstairs, I passed the guest room door. It had her name on it now. I had painted that door frame myself and reminded them it was a guest space. But now it felt like a cage. I stopped at the top of the stairs, my hand on the railing, fighting the urge to fall apart. My hands felt rough and tired from years of work. My back ached from bending in hospitals for decades. In that moment, I thought she could never have lived through a day of my past life. She could never handle the days I spent working hard, the nights I spent watching dying patients. And yet, she had the nerve to say, I have no vote here, when I paid for the life she had built. I held my breath and remembered the promise I made that morning. I will not cry. I will not beg. I will not shrink. I will find a way to remind them I matter. I closed my eyes and pictured the bank statements again, the names, the approvals, the stamped receipts. I realized I might soon have to use them, because giving silently had not worked. Doing my part quietly had been twisted into them seeing me as a charity case. I realized with a slow, burning pain that I was not just holding a family together. This morning, they reminded me I had no family. Maybe it was time they remembered I still had everything, including the power to begin again. I first noticed the labels on the yogurt containers. For John only, kids' lunch, do not touch, do not eat mine. The marker ink was still fresh, like a new warning. My hand stopped above the shelf, wondering if the strawberries I had washed and cut that morning would be labeled next. I closed the fridge door slowly and leaned on the counter, trying to understand the message without thinking too much about it. But the meaning was clear. They were drawing lines. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was just about keeping things neat. But the next morning, I opened the fridge to find my apples had been moved to the bottom drawer, and my milk had been replaced with almond milk, which I never bought. When I reached for eggs, there was a sticky note taped to the carton, "Please use your own groceries." Later that day, my daughter-in-law came to me with a rehearsed tone, smiling as if she were telling me good news. "I think we should all start buying our own food, just to be fair," she said, saying the words as if they were very important. "To be fair?" I repeated, putting down the sponge I had been using to clean their stove. "Yes," she replied, folding laundry she had left on the couch for days. "We all have different tastes and budgets. It just makes more sense." I said nothing. I just nodded and wrote bread and milk on a notepad I kept in my room. My room, not a shared room, not a family space, just mine, like I was a renter in the house I helped build. The next week, everything changed. I had a separate shelf in the pantry and a special drawer in the fridge. I started marking my items too, not because I was being childish, but because I had to. And with every label, I felt myself disappearing, little by little, cupboard by cupboard. Then came the text messages. I had always been part of the family group chat, mostly used for planning soccer practices, birthdays, and school pickups. I noticed I hadn't received any new messages for days. Curious, I asked my son if there was anything I needed to know about the children's camp sign-up. He looked confused. "I thought we talked about that last night." I stared. I wasn't there. He looked at his phone, then stopped. Oh, it must have moved to the new thread. "What new thread?" He looked away. "The one just for the three of us. It's easier for planning." So now, I wasn't even part of the family calendar. I wasn't a vote. I wasn't a voice. I was an afterthought. I heard them making weekend plans that I was never told about. I would hear the front door open and close and look out the window to see them driving away with the children dressed for something special. Birthday parties, dinners, day trips. I was never invited, No one even bothered to lie about why. I started eating meals in the living room, not at the table anymore. I didn't want to sit at a table where people whispered about me, where my food was separate, where my conversations felt like a door they couldn't wait to close. The living room used to feel like mine too. I had picked out the curtains with my son. I had sewn the cushion covers myself when they couldn't afford a new couch. Now, my favorite armchair was always covered with her decorative pillows and laptop. My blanket went missing one day. Later, I found it in the dog's bed. Then, one cold afternoon, I forgot to close the garage door. It was an honest mistake. I had brought in groceries, my own, of course, and must have pushed the wrong button. The groceries were heavy, and my back had started to hurt again. But that night, she came in fuming. "Do you realize the garage door was open all afternoon?" she snapped. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, standing near the sink. "Anyone could have walked in. Are you trying to get us robbed?" "No, it was a mistake." "It always is with you," she snapped, her voice getting louder. "It's always a mistake. You forget things. You slow us down. You eat our food. You crowd our space." I opened my mouth, but she raised her hand, not to hit me, but to silence me. "You're just a guest here," she said through tight teeth. "Not family." And there it was again. Guest. The word hurt more deeply this time. It wasn't just frustration. It was the truth as she saw it. I was not a mother-in-law, not a grandmother, not someone who helped. I was a burden in her home. I didn't reply. I walked into the living room, sat on the couch, and stared at the family photo on the fireplace. The one where I stood behind them, my hands on their shoulders, the proud older woman of the family. I looked at my own smile in the photo and realized it had been a long time since I saw that smile in the mirror. I sat there until the house was quiet, and I thought, not for the first time, about the bank account in my name. The one that fed this house, kept it warm, kept the lights on. I had never wanted to use it to control them, but maybe they needed a reminder of who truly made this house a home. I spent the entire morning at the kitchen table with papers spread out before me like a map for a battle. It had been a long time since I looked through my records, but the folders were still there, neatly placed in the second drawer of the old oak cabinet I had moved from my old home. I had kept everything. Every deposit slip, every signed paper, every letter from the bank. My husband had taught me that papers held power, and I had not forgotten. I found the folder labeled Trust Account, Margaret P. It was thick, heavier than I remembered. I pulled out the newest statements, reading line by line. Monthly transfers, $2,000, $1,800, $2,300. Each one paying for the same debit card my son and daughter-in-law used for household expenses. Groceries, school fees, utility bills, all of it came from that account. And every withdrawal had the same label, authorized by MP. My initials, not theirs. The account was mine, completely, legally, forever. When I first set it up, I thought of it as an act of love. My son had lost his job during the pandemic, and his wife had just given birth. They were drowning in bills, and I quietly stepped in. I had always been the kind of mother who helped without showing off. I called my financial advisor and asked about setting up an account that I could control while I was still alive, and I had controlled it every single penny. I thought about all the times I had paid their electricity bill before it was even due, the times I covered summer camp fees without being asked, the times they smiled at me like I was an important part of something, and the hundreds of times they ate food bought with my money and never once asked where it came from. They thought it was just my pension, my savings, my never-ending kindness. They never once thought that I might have a plan, that I might have a system, that I might still be smarter than they thought. I picked up the phone and dialed my advisor. "Mrs. Patterson, He said warmly, "What can I do for you today?" "I want to confirm something," I said, my voice steady, my heart calm. "The trust account for my family, under my name. I am still the only person who can make decisions for it, correct?" "Absolutely," he replied without hesitation. "You are the only one who can say yes to money coming out. You have complete control." And if I wanted to freeze it, I asked, more like a statement than a question. "Then it freezes," he said simply. They would have no access to the money, no transfers, no withdrawals, nothing. I paused, letting the silence sit between us. "They rely on it, you know," I whispered. "I know," he said softly, "but you don't need their permission to protect yourself." I looked at the newest bank statement again. A grocery charge from a fancy food store, a school payment, a clothing store receipt for children's shoes. All things I had happily paid for. All things I had quietly made possible, and all of it taken for granted. I imagined their next trip to the store, the card not working, the cashier saying sorry, my daughter-in-law's eyes getting wide with embarrassment, my son's confusion. And in that moment, I didn't feel mean. I felt clear. I closed the folder. "I'd like you to freeze the account," I said. He didn't ask why. He only replied, "Consider it done." And just like that, I took the first step back toward being myself. I didn't tell anyone. Not my son, not the kids, not the woman who had said through tight teeth that I was just a guest. I simply smiled. That quiet, knowing smile that holds a secret no one else knows. That afternoon, I made tea, folded laundry, and baked a peach cobbler for the children's afternoon snack. One last act from the woman they thought they could ignore. I placed it on the counter with a note, "Enjoy, darlings. Grandma." Then I went to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked out the window. No anger, no tears, just the silent power they never realized I had. I had given them love in the form of money, but now I was taking something back. Not the money, but my place, my pride, my voice. I woke early that morning without an alarm, without noise, just a steady breath and a certainty I hadn't felt in years. The sun had barely touched the curtains when I sat at the dining table, my last morning in that house. I wrote a simple note in my neatest handwriting. No strong feelings, no fancy words, just the truth in ink. "Thank you for reminding me who I really am." I folded the paper once and put it under the salt shaker in the middle of the kitchen table. I set a warm cup of tea beside it. It was jasmine tea, her favorite. Or maybe it used to be. I couldn't remember anymore. I packed only one suitcase, just enough for the next part of my life. My favorite sweater, the pearl earrings my husband gave me for our 25th anniversary, and the old paperback book I never finished. Everything else, every dish I had washed, every blanket I had folded, every meal I had paid for, could stay. I would not take crumbs from a table where I was no longer wanted. I left the house without a sound. No door slam, no goodbye. I slid the keys into the mailbox slot and walked toward the waiting taxi. The driver asked if I needed help with my bag. I smiled and said no. It was light, much lighter than I expected. 2 hours later, I was unlocking the door of a one-bedroom apartment tucked away on the edge of Colorado Springs, with views of the hot springs just a few blocks down. It was a place I had quietly bought 5 years ago with some of my inheritance, not because I didn't trust them, but out of wisdom, just-in-case plan. I never thought I would need it, but I was glad I did. The apartment smelled of fresh pine wood and clean floors. It was empty, but not lonely. I opened the windows and let in the cool morning air. I sat at the table and watched the light spread across the floorboards, free and at peace. The silence here felt different. It felt like mine. For the first time in years, I didn't hear footsteps rushing upstairs or voices behind closed doors. I didn't hear whispers about how forgetful I was or annoyance when I asked to be included. I didn't feel like a ghost in someone else's house. I turned off my phone. The calls came within days. First, my son. A text. Mom, did something happen to the account? The card's not working. Then another. The school called. Tuition payment failed. Can we talk? Then my daughter-in-law. Is this some kind of joke? The electric company says we're 2 weeks late. I didn't answer. Not because I wanted revenge. Not because I enjoyed watching them struggle. But because I had nothing left to say that they were ready to hear. They had made it very clear I was just a guest. Guests don't get emergency calls. Guests don't carry burdens. Guests don't have the power to destroy or save. But I had never been a guest. I had been the quiet current beneath their comforts, the invisible strong support of their stable life. And when I walked out, their whole world shook. A week after I left, they received official letters from the bank. No money available. A second letter from the school. Your child's tuition payment has failed. You need to pay now. And finally, the electricity company. Your bill is now overdue. Electricity will be turned off if not paid within 48 hours. It happened faster than even I expected. Not because I wanted it to, but because they had come to rely so completely on what I gave that they never built anything of their own. I had made it too easy, too warm, too safe for them. They had forgotten the hands that held it all together. So when those hands let go, they fell. I sat on my balcony that evening, a cup of warm tea in my hand, watching the sky get dark over Colorado Springs. I thought of my grandchildren. I missed their laughter. I missed their sticky fingers and sleepy hugs. But I would not go back, because if I did, I'd be returning not as a mother, but as someone who allowed them to stay dependent. They needed to learn, and I needed to live. In the peace of that moment, I breathed deeply and smiled, not out of bitterness, but out of truth. I had left quietly, but the silence I left behind was very, very loud. They fell apart faster than I expected. A week after I froze the bank account, the texts became desperate. My son sent message after message, each more urgent than the last. Mom, please call. We're trying to figure this out. Can you just explain what's happening? They might shut off the Wi-Fi today. Then came the emails, begging, explaining, saying sorry. But I did not reply. I had spent years replying, years of giving in, of making my words softer, of making myself smaller to make space for people who needed my money, but not my voice. This time, I let the silence speak for me. From what I heard through friends and neighbors, the house I left behind was no longer warm. The food shelves were empty. The fridge, once full of labeled containers and cheap milk, now held only ketchup, an old carton of eggs, and the last of the almond milk. My daughter-in-law, who once told me to stop drinking the milk, lost her job within 2 weeks. Something about missing too many deadlines and not enough childcare. My son took temporary work, mowing lawns, moving trash, anything that paid by the hour. He used to wear a tie every day. Now, he had blisters on his hands. A neighbor I used to walk with called one morning just to talk. She said, I saw her yesterday. Your daughter-in-law. She was in the driveway, yelling into her phone like someone had stolen her whole life. I almost laughed because, in a way, they had stolen mine first. The kitchen, that once smelled of cinnamon and morning pancakes, now sat cold. The oven was rarely used. The dining table was empty. She used to slam the guest room door like a period at the end of every argument. Now she left it open, hoping maybe I'd walk back through it. But I would not, because I was no longer the woman in the background, no longer the free babysitter, no longer the one cooking in silence while being talked about in whispers. I was completely gone. I had not blocked them. I had simply stepped out of reach. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, a message came through. Just 3 words. We need you. A few hours later, another, please come back. I'm sorry. And then one last voicemail. Her voice was shaking, but she tried to sound calm. Margaret, I know we said some things we shouldn't have. I know we were unfair, but we need help. The kids need things to be stable. John's working late every night, and well, it's hard. Please, can we just talk? I played it twice, then deleted it. Something in her voice still sounded like she thought she could fix this with words. But it was not her words that built that house. It was not her effort that kept it warm. It was mine. And I was done pretending otherwise. She thought I was a guest, but I had been the foundation. And when I walked out, the whole house remembered who had kept it standing. My mornings are quieter now. Not the kind of quiet that aches, but the kind that feels like a soft breath out after holding your breath for too long. I make a pot of Earl Grey tea every day at 7 sharp. I sit by the window of my little apartment, watching the steam rise from my cup. And for the first time in years, no one needs anything from me. No one's asking what's for breakfast. No one's handing me a grocery list or giving a fake thank you as they rush out the door. It is just me and peace. The days stretch gently now. I read the books I never finished, the ones that collected dust while I was busy being useful or feeling useful. I've started writing again. Nothing serious, just letters to myself. Small reminders that I am still here and still whole. Sometimes I take walks down to the hot springs, the sound of water trickling over rocks, a simple tune reminding me that everything flows eventually, even pain. I joined a group at the local community center. Women who are retired, strong, and ready. We meet twice a week for tea and talks. Most of them are widows like me, women who gave their lives to their families, only to find themselves empty in return. We talk about adult children who forgot, husbands who took but never taught, and the strange quiet that comes when you realize you're no longer needed, not for support, not for a purpose, just to exist. There is something deep in our shared feelings, a touching comfort that we are not alone. A shared understanding passes between us when our stories become too hard to explain, but still need to be heard. But we also laugh loudly with unexpected joy. Some of the ladies call me Grandma with the last laugh. I don't mind. I earned it. It took time, but I truly earned it. We giggle over shared memories. The bad haircut a daughter cried over. The terrible baked dish that burned to the bottom of the pan. The husband who thought a blender could solve all problems. And how we secretly enjoyed the mess more than we'd admit. Sometimes I help them check their wills, their savings, their legal papers hidden away in kitchen drawers and shoeboxes. I show them how to make sure their names are on the house ownership papers. I remind them to keep the original legal documents in a safe place, not on a shelf gathering dust. We talk about reading the small print, about never thinking that love will automatically protect you when sickness, death, or greed arrive. I let them cry, and I hold their hands as they realize that betrayal can come from those you know well. One woman cried when she found out her son had faked her signature to get a new loan for her house. Another smiled through tears as she cut up the joint credit card her daughter kept using too much. We call those moments Taking Back Tuesdays, because sometimes justice is not found in courtrooms full of lawyers in suits. It is found in quiet afternoons with a paper shredder and a friend, when your own shaking hands decide enough is enough. I do not hate my son. That would be too simple, too clean. Hatred means distance, and our pain, his and mine, was never distant. It was tangled, deeply rooted, grown from the same ground that once held bedtime stories, scraped knees, and a little boy who used to hold onto the edge of my apron just because he wanted to be close. I raised him to be better, kinder, more thankful. And for a time, he held doors open for older women. He volunteered on weekends. He used to kiss me on the cheek before dinner and whisper, "Thank you," without anyone asking. He once told me at 13 that when he grew up, he would buy me a house so I could stop working late nights at the hospital. But life has a way of taking away the softness from people, especially when they choose pride over memory, especially when comfort turns into a right. I see now that I protected him for too long. I kept him from the weight of responsibility, thinking I was loving him. But by doing so, I let it crush me instead. And still, I do not hate him. I just will not save him anymore. There's a difference between walking away in anger and stepping back with wisdom. My leaving was not fueled by bitterness. It was powered by clarity. Motherhood taught me many things. It taught me how to stretch $1 to make 4 meals, how to hide tears while stirring soup, how to smile when I was drowning, how to sit through people judging me at school meetings in a used coat while pretending not to care, how to put up with disrespect to keep peace at home, and how to pretend again and again that I was fine. But the most important thing motherhood taught me was when to let go. Because when your hands are always holding someone else up, you forget what standing feels like. You bend so often, you forget you were ever straight. To the women who might hear this someday, the mothers, the grandmothers, the wives, the caregivers, this is for you. Do not let them turn you into a stranger in the house you helped build. Do not let their comfort become your prison. Do not give and give until you disappear into the walls. Nothing more than a whisper at the edge of their busy lives. Keep your name on the deed. Keep your name on your dignity. And when they start calling you bitter or difficult or overly dramatic, remember, they only say that when you stop giving them everything. They will call you selfish the moment you stop being selfless for their convenience. When they forget who taught them how to hold a spoon, how to fold a shirt, how to comfort a child, remind them. Not with lessons or begging, but with silence, not anger, not revenge, just the quiet truth of your absence. Because some lessons are only learned in the sound of a door closing behind you. I used to stand in that kitchen like a shadow, cooking meals for people who no longer looked me in the eye. I used to walk carefully in my own home, afraid that my presence would break the delicate idea of their independence. I used to keep my opinions to myself because it was not my place. I was made to feel like a guest in the very home I helped build. And that broke something in me. Not loudly, not all at once, but slowly like a candle burning to its end. Now I wake each morning in the soft light of my own space. I pour my tea with both hands, no one interrupting, no chores waiting, no annoyed sighs from across the room. I eat when I'm hungry. I laugh when I feel like it. I play music loudly, and I sing even if I'm off key. I taste every bit of the peace I once paid for them to have. They still struggle. I hear through others that their bank account is still empty. The house is cold in winter. She lost her job. He picks up work where he can. The kids wear the same shoes for 2 school years straight. I do not watch. I do not brag about their problems. But I do remember. I remember being called a burden. I remember the grocery lists that had their names on everything except mine. I remember the way she said, "You don't get a say under our roof," as if I hadn't paid for the walls that held her words. I remember sitting in that house, my heart beating fast, hearing my name in quiet tones when they thought I was asleep. And if they ever wonder how it all fell apart, if they ever sit in the cold kitchen and look at each other with confusion and ask what happened, they will have to answer this. What happens when the hands that held you finally let go? When the woman who covered your rent, bought your groceries, paid your bills, and smiled through every insult stops, I gave them warmth. They gave me warning labels on food. I gave them stability. They gave me being sent away. I gave them memories. They returned convenience. So I gave them what they feared most, freedom from me, and I will not take it back. As I sit now, surrounded by books and music and women who see me, not use me, I do not wish to change the past. I do not long for them to come back. I do not pray for their return. I hope they learn. And if they never do, then I hope they at least understand what it means to lose someone who never asked for much, only respect. Because at the end of it all, that's what this story has always been about. It's not revenge. It's not anger. It's remembrance. Remembrance of who I was before I was silenced, before I was labeled, before I was thanked for everything with nothing. So, to the daughters-in-law who forget who paid for their homes, to the sons who grow too proud to remember whose hands wiped their tears, to the families who think love has conditions and care is a business deal, let me say it clearly. My daughter-in-law called me a guest, but today I own peace, and she's just paying rent to survive. If you felt a spark of recognition, if a part of you whispered, that could have been me, then remember this. We are many mothers, grandmothers, women whose silence once filled every room, and whose strength now fills every word. At Grandma True Stories, we do not shout. We remember. We take back what is ours. We remind the world what happens when the quietest woman finally speaks. If you believe in justice told slowly and truth that cannot be erased, join us for more real stories from women who were never just guests, but the foundation all along. Because when a grandma speaks, the world doesn't just listen. It changes.